back to your point, like you have a 9-to-5 person who's trying to raise a family of 3. I mean, in the lending world, we see this on a daily basis. People are applying, even with no debt. They're not qualifying for the homes that are big enough for a wife and 2 kids or 3 kids.
Brandon Rubenstein has worked in mortgage lending for 18 years with over $1 billion in loans funded.
His hands-on approach to portfolio-based lending has made him a beacon for high-net-worth individuals and family offices across the country.
When he's not lending, he works on private equity deals on behalf of select clients. The most recent of which is a $65 million land deal for a prominent Miami development.
I would say I'm like that perfect, disaster. Organization, that's not my skill set.
And I feel like a lot of us have rejected that and gone down entrepreneurial paths.
I mean, this generation, there's so much that you can do outside of the norm.
And then how have you built that into this high net worth client base that you have?
I always made it a personal transactions. Whether it's getting docs signed when I first got in the business, I would meet that customer face to face. I think that the one thing that people are losing in today's business is everybody wants to hide behind email.
How do you do 400 transactions in a year and make that a personal relationship? That's impressive.
Non-traditional. I mean, we had a customer that we did a deal for together. He was a physician, and I took the docs to the hospital lobby and met with him.
What's the largest loan you've done?
Residential, $14.5 million.
What do you think the most misunderstood aspects of the mortgage lending business are? Hey guys, I'm James Danley. Welcome back to the Bulldogs Podcast. Today we're sitting down with a good friend of mine, Brandon Rubenstein. He is one of the top residential lenders in the state of Michigan. He has funded over $1 billion with a B in his loan lending career, and he's raised private capital for some very large developments in Miami. Most of his clientele are very high net worth individuals, $300, $500 million net worths. His circle of friends is incredibly cool. He's got a great life story, comes from humble beginnings. It's a pleasure to have you here today, my friend. Welcome to the Bulldogs Podcast.
Thanks, James, for having me on.
So you and I have been working together for a handful of years. Brandon's actually doing a personal loan for me right now. I'm in the process of building a home, and you guys funded it and put it all together. So we've worked with a lot of clients together over the years. It's always been impressive to me, man, the clientele that you work with and how high profile a lot of these guys are, and the assets and the businesses that they've built. And you've got an incredible track record because you've closed or found a way to fund every loan that your clients have ever needed, even if that's outside third parties. And you're a credible guy in the space in the industry. So I guess I'd like to start back at the beginning and give the audience a little bit of your background. Where were you born and raised? How did you grow up? What were your first memories of ambition, and what kind of shaped your youth that then led you down this path?
So yeah, I was born in Chicago, Illinois. We moved up here when I was 4. My dad was in the auto industry. So, of course, Motor City, we ended up relocating to Rochester Hills. Like you said, very humble background. Dad was an engineer, worked that 9-to-5 schedule. I went to the public schools up until high school in Rochester, then ended up going to Brother Rice High School. And
who'd your dad work for?
He was with Chrysler.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he came up for the minivan project.
What are your memories of his working career, growing up, and what you saw with him?
Just always 9-to-5. He was a hardworking guy. Had a great educational background, and it just kind of shaped me into I did not want that mold. I was always pushed towards that 9-to-5, get that career where you have that stable salary job, and I just never wanted what he had. So
I went down a very similar path. So you went to Brother Rice. I mean, I know that you have a little more contacts in this community than I did, but that's a great school from what I understand.
Great school.
And did your parents help like pay for that, or like how did that happen that you were able to go to Brother Bryce? And like how did that shape your network and sphere and like your perspective on things?
My mom was the one who really kind of pushed for the education. My mom was a teacher, and she valued education. She thought that that was most important. You go to a good high school, go to college, you get a degree after college, like a master's or something. That she put the whole, like, everything weighed on going to college. And I was the one who just kind of broke that whole mold.
The mold and rejected it.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a similar theme with our generation, man. Like we were all told, like, go to school, get a good job, work the standard like 9 to 5, build a career path. And I feel like a lot of us have rejected that and gone down entrepreneurial paths. What do you think the cause of that is?
I mean, this generation, there's so much that you can do outside of the norm. I mean, when I was 20, 21, I was getting tattoos. I was breaking the norm. Like, when you go into a job interview at that point in time, like 2002, 2003, and you have tattoos, people are looking at you like, you do not belong here.
In the corporate world.
And now the corporate world is shifting. I mean, people who are leading, like, the nation now aren't the normal, like, white-collar people. So it's just, times have evolved, and I think that being like your own boss, being able to control your own schedule, it actually gives more accountability, and that's what I think is missing today.
Accountability is a great point. It also enables you to create the results that you want. I think that like the big changes the last 30 years is there's a few, but I think the devaluation of the dollar is one. Like inflation and eating away at like your savings makes like working the 9 to 5 it doesn't make as much sense. Like it doesn't create like the lifestyle it did in the 50s and the outcomes. And I think that the youth kind of acknowledge and realize that. So they're seeking other paths to build their careers. And I think that you've worked with a lot of cool people, man. A lot of immigrant entrepreneurs that are worth a lot of money, and a ton of immigrant entrepreneurs, actually. Now I'm thinking about, like, several of our big clients have been immigrants that came to the U.S. and they're worth hundreds of millions of dollars now.
It's work ethic, and that's what's missing. I mean, back to your point, like, you have a 9 to 5 person who's trying to raise a family of 3. I mean, they're trying to do that on $75,000, $80,000 a year. I mean, in the lending world, we see this on a daily basis. People are applying, even with no debt. They're not qualifying for the homes that are big enough for a wife and 2 kids or 3 kids.
Yeah, it's scary. And asset prices keep going up. I mean, the more the debt dollar is devalued, the more it pushes asset prices. It creates that wealth gap, which, destroys the middle class, unfortunately.
Like that gap is so big right now.
It is big. So back to your youth, man. So like you kind of always had the inclination to go your own route, even though your parents were always like 9 to 5, school, college. So what happened like after your high school years? What'd you do for college or university? How did that play out? And then what led you on like the entrepreneurial path to end up in the lending space?
So I ended up going to Loyola University in Chicago. I followed the path that my mom wanted me to go down for that point in time. And that's when I had the fork in the road. It's like I could get a 9 to 5 job and be stuck in a cubicle, or I could go down my own path. And that's where I tapped into commercial real estate at that point in time.
Now, was that while you were still in college, or how did that play out?
That was right out of school in Chicago.
So you graduated and you went into the commercial real estate space.
Yep.
Talk to me about what that first job role was like and like how that shaped you. And
I mean, it was all based off of, I mean, in the real estate market, it's you go work for a big firm, and whatever you kill is what you eat. So however hard like you were to go out there and get like contracts and get property under contract, that's what you're going to take home for the month. So, I mean, I started off there, got in with a couple big companies out there, and I was like, wow, this is not what I saw growing up. So I got the bug, and from that point on, I never wanted to work for anybody but myself.
now, was that a sales role that you were in? Were you
Yes.
brokering and selling commercial real estate?
I was co-brokering with a big agent out there.
So how long did you do that for? And then like at what point in time did you make a decision to transition to lending? And why did you make that decision to transition?
So I ended up coming back to Michigan, getting into the residential real estate space. And at that point in time, I was with Remax, and we had an in-house lender. And so I kept dabbling at that point in time with both. And so at that point, I was like, you know what? I kind of like the lending side more. And that's just where I found my niche. And from then on.
Do you think it was a better fit for your skill sets, or what was it that naturally led you into the lending space?
It was definitely more set to my skill set. Just being able to like constantly work with people. I'm very much a people person. And with the real estate side, you're only working with a couple people a month, where with the lending side, you're constantly able to just grow your business. I mean, you're reaching out to businesses, you're reaching out and getting corporate partnerships. And that was kind of where I excelled.
So for a younger audience, if someone's looking at both like real estate sales versus real estate lending, and now that you've done both, how would you describe both of those roles to that audience and how they should make a decision between the two based on their personal skill sets? Like, what do you think is necessary to succeed in either or, and how are they different from your experience?
I mean, just kind of like looking at your business, you're very analytical, and you can price per square foot a home in any market. That's just not my skill set. I'm more of the get out there and get as many people under like some type of deal. And I would say I'm like that perfect like disaster. Like as far as like organization, that's not my skill set. It's sales. And so that's just where I'm able to like develop these relationships with these clients. And I don't know if it's a gift or a curse, but that's just where I excel, is just networking.
So on the lending side, you feel like it's more, much more like a deeper relationship base. Because I do know a lot of your clients consistently come back to you, like you're doing refis on commercial buildings and tons of residential.
Loyalty.
It's like long-term client relationships that you have with these individuals. And also, I think it gives you a little more freedom too. Like in the lending side, like you can be anywhere. Like half the time you're in Miami, we're doing phone calls or whatever, and you're working on development deals down there with some of the guys, and like you're able to geographically be free while processing, handling loans. And then I've noticed too, like you're able to outsource like the organizational piece to like your support staff or team or whatever. Whereas in the sales side, it's a little more difficult. Like we have to be like, our clients want personal FaceTime with us, and we're more geographically locked in.
So the nice thing about lending is I can be the face of it, but deep down, like I'm not really doing anything. I have my assistant, my junior LOs, like those guys are doing like the gritty work, but from the face standpoint, like the customer knows that I have their back 100%. And to kind of touch on it, I mean, like loyalty is like the biggest thing with lending. And that's why I think a lot of my clients and like my big networking, like referral, like COIs keep coming back to me is because of my loyalty. And that's something that's really hard to find, I think, in today's like industry. Like you can get a guy who will say, hey, I'm going to get you the best rate possible, or I'm going to do this, this, and this. They overpromise and underdeliver. And my thing is I never want to fall short of whatever I promise these guys.
I think that you have like made a big exception in the industry, because I mean, we got a big lending brokerage right across the street. We can see them from here. And those guys just crank through loans. And the approach to the industry is now it's like everything's competitive too with rates. So it's like I see a lot of lenders that are just undercutting each other for who can give best pricing. And a lot of times the client doesn't understand the product or quality differential to working with like a smaller bank and doing portfolio lending versus the big mortgage brokers. But the unique thing with your business is that you have built like those long-standing, like high net worth clientele relationships, and you've kept them. Like very few lenders have the ability to do that in this business. There's only a few that have done it. So I think it's a valuable concept to speak to. I mean, for maybe some of the younger guys that are in that lending grind, that are at a mortgage brokerage or whatever, and they have had a tough time keeping clients, especially because a lot of times they don't have a face-to-face relationship with them. They're just on the phone, right? So when you first started in the business, how did you first get your first like loan or first few client deals done? And then how have you built that into like this high net worth client base that you have?
I always made it a personal like transaction. So I never wanted to hide behind a phone. Whether it's getting docs signed when I first got in the business, I would meet that customer face to face. Like take that package to 1003, get it signed in person. Like give an actual sense of like, hey, we're gonna meet, we're gonna have a cup of coffee, we're gonna go over everything, so that way you see everything, and any questions you have, I'm gonna answer for you. I think that the one thing that people are losing in today's business is everybody wants to hide behind email. It's let me type out an email, you respond to it. Like people don't pick up the phone. People
Email and
don't-
text, yeah.
People don't want to like be on the phone. People don't want to meet face to face, and it's not necessarily about like cranking out as many. I mean, I had this approach, and I think in 21 I closed like 430 some deals. 22 was like
Wow.
300 deals.
That's
So
over a deal a day. That's crazy.
I mean, so even when the rates were low, rates were still coming back up. I was still cranking out the numbers, and I was still making it a personal relationship.
How do you do 400 transactions in a year and make that a personal relationship? That's impressive.
It's just balance. I mean, you got to get in the office early. You just got to stay late. I mean, non-traditional. I mean, we had a customer that we did a deal for together. He was a physician, and I took the docs to the hospital lobby and met with him.
I remember that one because he had like two other lenders he was courting, and you got the business because you went to the hospital and met him. He was busy, and I was pushing for it as well. But I remember that it was that face-to-face and that small personal touch that then closed him and got the business.
And then it's the personal follow-up, too. I mean, he reaches out to me with questions. I'll reach out, hey, how's the family doing? How's the new house? I mean, you just got to keep that relationship, because at some point he's either going to refi that rate, he's going to make some kind of financial change, maybe pull out some equity out of his property for investments, and you just always want to be on the forefront, like when they're thinking.
Now, is this like a system that you have outlined? Like, do you use the CRM like a lot of the guys that preach this stuff? It's like, hey, here's your CRM, here's your touches per year, boom, 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 like an overall like structured mathematical system to follow up? Or do you just do it naturally where it's natural flow and like you kind of go through and you tag, past clients here and there, and it's just more of a...
All natural flow.
That's interesting.
I don't believe in just sending out like mass, like, oh, hey, it's your birthday, here's a generic card. It's the remembering like different things about clients. I had a guy did something for 6 years ago, and we just happened to cross paths, and I was like, I did your house in Brighton. He's like, how do you remember that? And it's just making sure that like throughout the transaction that you highlight key points and it just sticks.
So you do have a naturally good memory too when it comes to clients and details. I don't know that everyone has
As I'm
that,
getting
but-
older, not so much. So maybe I will have to go to a CRM. But yeah, I mean, and also with like that whole loyalty thing, I mean, I've been looked at by some people like, hey, you've bounced to a couple banks like in a time frame. I left a big bank to go where I'm at now because of a deal for a customer. Like this was a great client of mine. He's been a big referral source. He's down in Miami, and there was underlying circumstances why that bank didn't want the deal. And I was told by head of portfolio, you will never get this closed anywhere. I'm like, but I have a place where I can go. I said, I can take my book of business and go there. You will never get it closed.
So hold on, for someone that doesn't know the lending business, why would a bank not want to do that loan? Give us some details about what the parameters were. Like, why would a specific bank not do a loan?
There is some risk on it, but with that risk, there was a lot of compensating factors on the loan. So there's some banks out there that are tightening the straps and like the lending restrictions, and then there's some that realize you got to put money out there to keep money coming in.
Was it just too large of a loan amount,
It
for
was
a
a
residential purchase for their portfolio size, or what were the restrictions?
It was just like it's down in Miami, it's out of footprint, so there's just things about it that they didn't like. But great LTV, client had amazing like debt to income, just was cash flowing, And I said, this can get done. And
How big was the loan size?
about $4.5 million.
Okay, that's not that big.
I mean, it wasn't astronomical, but they just didn't have the appetite for it. And there was another bank who had been courting me. I said, you know what? Well, let's do this. And that's just where I'm at. Like, my loyalty, like, I'm not going to tell somebody who has been a great client for years, like sending me a ton of business, hey, I'm just going to send it and have somebody else do the loan for you, because that's not the personal touch that they're expecting. And I mean, that relationship is just constantly just paid dividends, like year after year. And so, I mean, there's some people like in the business who are like, well, you've bounced around. I'm like, but that's my loyalty. Like, that's why. Like, there's not like I'm not being pushed out of a bank and into another one. It's I choose where I go. And
Makes sense, yeah.
And it's all just planned and calculated. It's not that I'm just like flying by the seat of my pants, like picking where I'm going.
No, a lot of agents hop around too, unfortunately. I think they, for different pay and fee structures and whatnot. It's pretty common in the industry, I think, for people to jump around. I think in the past, so you mentioned to me that you've never had like a single client that needed a loan and you didn't find a way to fund it. Do you have any other stories like that? I mean, have you had any situations where you've had to like send them somewhere else because the bank didn't do the loan, and like with the timeline or any other examples or stories you could share on that front?
Yeah, I mean, during like the COVID time, I had a couple agents who had some deals that were not going to fit into the big box bank. So before I got into like the big box bank, I started with a credit union. I was in there for about 4.5 years. And I mean, got some great insight on like being able to like grow my portfolio lending from my old VP there. Amazing guy. Like, he was a VP for a couple big major banks. End of his career, he just wanted something a little bit slower. Credit unions being smaller, they don't have an appetite for the big size loans that I was starting to grow into. So that's why I cut ties there. But I was with a bank, and we had a deal with a client who, because of COVID and the changing in guidelines, he had some like decreases in income, which everybody had. I mean, COVID is kind of like the baseball steroid years. There should be an asterisk.
Sure.
I mean, it's not.
Yeah, everyone's businesses were shut down. I mean, it was like,
You got people who had businesses
wild.
who were shut down. You had people who had declining income. And so it's kind of like you just got to take that slice of time. You got to remove it and look at what's happening before and what's currently happening. So this guy needed the deal closed for his customers, like big like customer. I was like, I can't do it. I called up my.
How big was the loan?
It was like 1.5 million.
Okay.
Nothing like.
Nothing crazy either.
No.
COVID was difficult.
So I called up and I said, hey, I need a favor. The credit union, being smaller, they have the ability to make exceptions. They have the ability to go in front of their board, who is like 3 or 4 people, and say, hey, we need to get this done.
And we'll get this guy's business.
And they got the deal closed in 7 days.
Wow.
Yeah. Got disclosures out, followed like all the trade guidelines, everything. And the deal closed. It funded. So,
That's amazing.
yeah, I mean, if something falls in my lap and I can't do it, I'm not going to let somebody down, because that's the surefire like career suicide.
What's the largest loan you've done for residential?
Residential, 14.5 million.
Wow, it's a big loan. Was that in Miami?
No, that was a condo in Central Park, New York.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's wild. How'd you get a client that's doing a condo in New York?
Big attorney down in Miami. We did his property down at the Aquilina. His home down there, it appraised at 26.2 million. We did a loan for him on that for 10.5 million. And then he also owned a condo in Central Park that we did.
That's awesome.
So
It's wild, man. So when you started in your career, what were the core components that set you up for success looking back on your foundation in the lending space?
I think it was just my self-competitiveness, that I just wanted to compete with myself and be in something that I found fascinating, and that was helping people achieve what they want to do.
When So let's talk about lending, because a lot of people I don't think even understand like the lending space and the complexities and differences between like mortgage brokers and like banks that have the ability to portfolio. So like to that end, can you speak to the differences between those two, like brokerage versus portfolio lending, and help the audience understand a little better?
So, I mean, with a broker, you're going to be more, that's going to be just like your straight down the fairway deals. You're going to have somebody who's got perfect credit. They got W-2s. They're putting 20% down. They're going to go through the broker space, and the broker's going to go through the wholesale channels and find a home for that loan. But when you think about, you're going to have a middleman with that. So your fees are going to be higher. You're probably not going to get the best rate because like if you're with Citizens, which I'm in the retail channel there, Citizens isn't going to give the wholesale channel the same rate as they're going to offer me as their employee, because we're going to be making more money for the bank. What's convenient about a broker is they're going to shop it around, but in this market, every place is going to be very, very competitive as far as rates go. But when you get into like the retail channel where I'm at, you have portfolio. So if, let's say, you were unemployed for a gap of time, or there is an explainable reason, we can port that loan. We don't have to just decline it because it doesn't check box A, B, and C. Also, too, when you get outside those conforming loan limits, we're going to be able to portfolio that loan. Doctors, we have our physician programs where they can put no money down. That's going to be a portfolio space. So it's just all, there's more avenues and there's more space to play in the gray area with portfolio lending. And when I say in the gray area, it's not like the back in like 07, 08 stated income, stuff like that. No, it's, if there's
more flexibility,
yes,
to the borrower's profile.
Yep.
So a lot of the self-employed individuals, the guys with the multiple businesses, complicated financials, everyone tends to go the portfolio space. And portfolio space is where the bank is actually lending with their own funds. It's on their balance sheet. It's not being brokered off to the wholesale space or to Freddie or Fannie initially. Like they're using their own banking abilities to fund the loan. Therefore, they have more control over it. They can make edits on the terms. They can make exceptions, and they can custom tailor the loan package around the buyer profile.
exactly.
So was it a conscious decision for you at some point in your career to go the bank portfolio route, or did that naturally occur as you got more and more high profile clients? Like that's just the loan products that they need, and it kind of organically happened.
It just organically happened. It's a natural transition because you get a guy who owns 5-6 businesses. Part of being self-employed is being able to take advantage of tax codes, and you're going to get these like tax returns that show no income, but there's depreciation that can be added back in the portfolio space, and you can take and look at these and analyze them and come up with a educated judgment on, should we loan this guy money or should we not? And 9 out of 10 times, you're going to find a way to get it done in the portfolio space.
What's the hardest loan you think you've ever had to do for a client? It was you had to get creative or overcome some obstacles on. How'd you pull that off?
I mean, there's a handful that come right to my...
Yeah, give us a few stories.
I had a guy who was self-employed and he was buying a non-warrantable unit. So, I mean, you got self-employed...
Condo?
Non-warrantable condo.
Where at?
New York.
What price point?
About $3.5 million.
Okay.
And especially in New York, they have so many different challenges in that market because you have residential and then below you have store space, and you'll have somebody who buys 2 of them, combines them. So, I mean, you got lots of hurdles. But at the end of the day, I mean, he was a big person with Chase. I mean, he had all of his funds there. And so we were able to just kind of come to an agreement. Hey, move some of your relationship over. That's going to help. Put a little bit more money down. And then we kind of said, okay, hey, you're about to do your tax returns. You got to claim this, this, and this. And we worked with his CPA and got it done. But, I mean, he had gone to Chase, and immediately, within 24 hours, he just got a big, giant red denial.
Yeah, Chase is difficult for residential lending, even if you have a lot of assets there. I've had a lot of clients have that experience that have businesses, corporate assets that are insane at Chase, and they have struggled on the residential lending front with them. They're just not built to do an effective job of it. So you guys actually coached him with the CPA for his next tax returns to make sure they're positioned correctly to properly qualify. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's giving each customer that personal experience that's what they're going to remember. If you just are like, hey, we can't do this, you're never going to get a second chance. And that's the thing. You always have to, like, even when you're taking an application, if you see like a red flag, you're going to warn them, hey, I'm just going to be transparent with you. There's a chance that we can't get this done. But if you see, okay, there's a couple things that might not be right in line with where we need to be, you look at the whole picture and you see if it's a coachable situation before you decline it. And that's what they appreciate.
It's awesome. You have any other creative stories that you had to overcome? Challenging loans?
I mean, every single loan has its hurdles.
That's true.
There's always going to be a little hair on every deal. But those are the fun ones.
That's true. So as you build your business, man, like, you know, how fast did it compound with like high net worth individuals? Was it that you found you ran in certain circles? Like, how did you connect with that audience not coming from it necessarily? And then how did you end up like surrounding yourself with all these high net worth clients?
It just was a natural transition. And before like I knew it, I had like kind of like insulated my COIs with this group. And I mean, it evolved very quickly. I mean, when I was first starting off, I mean, 200, then 300, then 400. And it was just a natural growth in purchase price or refi amount. And that's the other thing too, is I never was one who just relied on refi business. You'll get guys who get into this business and they're either at the beginning, middle, tail end of like a refi boom, and they think, okay, this is going to like be going on forever. But that's just not how rates work, and that's just not the cycle of this business. You're going to have the ebbs and the flows, and it was getting in with like agents like yourself and just growing like with that business and being like strong in purchase as well as having some refi business, but you can't always just play in that sandbox.
What percentage of your business is like purchase versus refi, or does that just change with the market cycles as interest rates ebb and flow? You shift between both?
I always try to keep like 60 to 70% purchase business. I mean, there will be some years where it's a little bit more refi, like in a refi boom. I mean, nobody ever saw like the whole COVID and rates in like 1s and 2%.
So you're refining everybody.
So, I mean, yeah, everybody. But also, too, at that same point in time, there was a big boom in purchase business, too. So it was kind of a give and take.
Interesting. Looking back on your career, man, what are your primary like, lessons learned or takeaways in how you built your business that you would have a conversation with like the next younger audience that's getting in this space?
I would just say you got to have a good balance of like the old school, and you have to have a good balance of like the new school, like business practices.
Define those. What?
Like the old school is that in person, face to face, like not hiding behind the emails, but also too like the one thing I don't do enough of that a lot of other people that are more successful than me is with the social media, and that's something that I'm looking into to like evolve my business. I mean that's where you have to have that balance. Could I have been even more successful if I had like put myself out there more with social media? Probably, and that's where like end of last year I kind of like did a little self-evaluation, which I mean you have to do every year, is like how can I grow my business more, and that's something that I think I need to do too.
Have your hobbies or passions like helped facilitate that client base at all?
Oh, absolutely. Like I love to go golfing. I mean, go out there, have a cigar, have a drink, play some golf, and being able to invite clients out there or people I do business with. I mean, that's a great way to grow.
So golf's been effective for you. What are the other areas that you think are the other hobbies that have helped grow your business space?
Golfing is really like the big one. I mean, going to like, I'm into cigars. I mean, we do events together kind of based around those. I mean, great networking events. It's just kind of, each year I kind of look at my schedule and say, hey, what do I want to like put like some like sponsorships in? And it's always, I end up doing like golf outings, and those are always really a strong thing for me.
Yeah, those are a lot of fun too. I know that you met a few of the guys that you do a lot of business with in Miami, just like in happenstance, like having cigars with them randomly or like being in the right places. Like,
I mean, my big COI I met during COVID. I took a trip down to Key Biscayne, was sitting out having a cigar, and we just started talking. And now we're going on 5 years of business together.
that's amazing.
And I think we've probably closed, between like his stuff, referrals, probably about $100 million in business.
That's amazing. From someone you met down in Key Biscayne having a cigar. Were you guys at the beach or where were you at?
We were just in the middle like of the hotel, like right in the back between the two pools, just having a cigar.
See, that's a testament to, I think, that like, one, if you're in the space, like, cigars are one of the last, bastions of traditional masculinity to some extent. And a lot of the high profile business guys enjoy them, and it's a passion, it's an art. And if you're in that environment, it leads to higher profiles of business. And then I assume the hotel you were staying at was also nice.
It was a nice hotel.
So if you're putting yourself in that environment surrounded by high profile individuals and you have common interests, that naturally compounds and leads to business. I mean, that's wild, man. You had a cigar with a guy and then you do $100 million in business with him over 5 years.
I mean, it's that old like belief. I mean, surround yourself with who you want to be associated with and who you want to do business with. I mean, if you're staying at a nice hotel and you're networking while you're down there, I mean, you're going to come across people. And I love to travel, and there's stories where I've met people just sitting by the pool. I mean, you just talk about what you do, what they do, and that's the thing. I mean, it's that old art of just socialization. I mean, and that's lost on the youth today.
Yeah, a lot of the younger generation doesn't know how to do that, man. I think it's unsocial. So for someone that's young, that's trying to envision that, like if you're out on the beach, like what's that conversational profile look like for the young kid who's...
Put your phone down and talk to people. I mean, your Instagram account, your TikTok is going to be there like later on, but it's not hiding behind your phone, not sitting at home gaming. It's like getting out and doing stuff. And that's where you're going to meet people. But
How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a great
instead
book.
of looking down at your phone, look up, talk to people.
Did you ever read business books at all, or was there any sort of like that element, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, for instance, or like did you read any business books? Did any of that influence your career path at all?
I would say I skimmed through a lot of books.
Okay, grab the highlights on them.
Yeah, like the cliff notes of them.
Okay, makes sense.
Time management. Strong suit.
Can you remember any like pivotal individual moments that were like important or critical for like shaping your career as you look back? Or was it all just kind of like a natural flow and compound with work ethic? Any mentors or anything? Or
I had a lot of mentors in the business, like my old VP at Genesis. I mean, one of my strongest mentors. I mean, at that point, my dad was already gone, so this guy kind of like filled that like space. I mean, he was like at the age where he was getting out of his career, and he wanted to see me grow. And like I said, I had a great relationship with my dad, but it just wasn't down the career path that I wanted to. And this guy, like, he had a solid family, solid foundation, and just his lifestyle was kind of what I emulated. So
your dad passed away, you said?
Yeah, my dad passed away 14 years ago.
How old were you?
At that point, I was 30 when he passed away.
Okay. So you're established then, you're grown by then. And then you had a business mentor in the space that you saw his lifestyle and you're like, this is kind of the path I want to go down.
Yeah, and that was how I kind of like started to like evolve even more in the space.
What were the main lessons or takeaways that he taught you?
Really like the loyalty and just maintaining that responsive likeness with your clients. Like don't the one thing that he always said is he had like a sundown policy, and that was you always respond to somebody before the sun goes down. So if you had emails, always respond to them before the end of the night, or if people had called you, call them back, because people are doing a mortgage and it's very stressful, and you don't leave them hanging overnight. And that was just something that's always stuck with me. So I mean, you and I do business, you'll see, like, I'm calling people at 9 o'clock at night if they're calling me. And it's just because I don't want them, like, being worried about their deal, like, overnight. And to some people, that's huge.
Makes sense. So you're talking a lot about loyalty. It's funny because, like, when I hear the word loyalty in lending, it's very rare because a lot of times clients are not loyal. I mean, even in the sales business, like, they're not loyal, right? Like, we get burnt all the time by clients. You invest a ton of time and energy in, and, like, it's absolutely brutal. It's even worse in the lending front because a lot of times they don't have that face or personal connection. So, like, how have you navigated, like, clients not being loyal to you? Like, for the young broker that's just getting started and they're, like, selling loans, they keep having clients burn them, and they're like, oh, I'm listening to this guy talk about loyalty, but my clients are never loyal to me. Like, how would you speak to that person?
I would say, I mean, like, for me, it's establishing that relationship with the client. And for a lot of, like, customers, like, they'll try to shop me. And being in the business as long as I have, I know how to navigate those things. And, oh, hey, just put it in writing for me. You want me to put it in writing because you want to use me to go up against another bank? And I'm very much, like, transparent. I can't bullshit somebody. Like, if you're trying to bullshit me, I'm going to call you out on it. And like I said in the beginning, sometimes it's a curse, sometimes it's a blessing, but it's really just having that real conversation with somebody and just saying, hey, look, you're wasting my time. I don't waste your time. Like, we need to have this be a mutual, like, understanding. And kind of calling people out on that stuff is eye-opening. I don't do it, like, rudely, but you just have to do it, like, where you're asserting yourself and making it a reality to them. Like, hey, I have a family I have to feed. You're trying to save money for yourself. Let's work together and get this done.
Have you ever had a client that wasn't loyal, that, like, burnt you? And then how did you handle that? And then to have them come back?
Oh, you always have the customer who knows more than you. I mean, those are the best ones. I mean, being here in Michigan, we have Rocket. And you always have that customer who says, hey, I can get this rate. And during, like, the whole COVID time, all these banks got so backed up. I mean, they couldn't keep up with the loans. And they had rate locks that they were just, like, blowing. And so I had one guy, he just was like, no, you can't get this thing done for me. And I'm like, yep, we can get it done at this rate. Well, I can get it done at this rate. I'm like, you can't. 3 months later, he calls me up. He's like, hey, can I still get that rate? I'm like, no, but we can get you what today's rate is. I'm like, so they didn't deliver? He's like, no. I'm like, if it sounds too good to be true, it normally is. He's like, yeah, I got burned bad this time. So, but yeah, I get those all the time where, I mean, Rocket's not doing their advertising and their marketing for free. Somebody's paying for it, and it's the consumer. So
it's funny too, because, like, I know we've had a few clients together where they have had complicated financials and they're trying to go the Rocket route, and you just are like, there's no way Rocket can close this loan. I know what their parameters are.
Yeah, I mean, Rocket's gotten, like, a little bit better with being able to, like, do some types of, like, complicated deals, because they'll have investors who'll buy these loans. But for the most part, you're paying a premium for that risk, where with the bank, we can figure out a way to go around it, and you don't pay that premium.
So what about, like, your personal life, man? I mean, obviously, you like cigars, you travel a decent amount. Like, for the audience, like, who is, outside of, like, your business profile, like, who is Brandon Rubenstein?
One tired guy.
He's got a young family at home too, so that's probably part of it.
Yeah, having a 2-year-old at home, I mean, that's what I do everything for. I mean, I have a son, and I mean, that's who I get up for in the morning and stay late in the office for. is to give him the life that I want him to have, and to be able to show him how successful you can be with hard work. So that would be kind of me outside in a nutshell.
So now you're focused on the family life. Do you always know that you want to have kids and have a family? Was that always like in the desire of your heart, or that evolve or happen over time?
I always wanted a son. Absolutely. It just was always like, when is the right time? And I mean, you'll find in life that there's never the right time. So that happened a little bit later for life for me, but I mean, I wouldn't change things.
That's awesome. So back to the like exceptional loan officer thing. Like what's the difference between like a good mortgage loan officer and an exceptional one? How do you categorize the differences between those two?
I wouldn't put it like on a dollar perspective. I mean, you got some bad loan officers out there who do good numbers, but it's how many of their clients are going to come back to them. And that's what I categorize as exceptional. I mean, I'm referral based. I do some marketing, but for the most part, everything that comes to me is all referral based. And that means the most. If you got somebody who's going to refer a loved one to you, that's the greatest compliment in business that you can get.
For sure. Do you have any like specific habits that you think or practices that contribute to like your success as a top producing loan officer?
I think it's about a lifestyle. I think any career is a lifestyle, and I get up early, I go to the gym, I want to stay in like the best shape I possibly can, because that is going to mean I feel good about myself, which means I'm going to put my best foot forward in business. And I think that's something too that people don't do. People say, "Oh, I'm tired, I'm going to sleep in." But while somebody else is sleeping in, I'm grinding and getting up, being on the treadmill in the morning. I'm thinking about business and how I can like grow my business, how I can do a deal. So not only is it helping me from a health perspective, but it's like letting me just have some like time to myself to think about what my next move is going to be.
I feel like there's a little bit of comeback for like that discipline and drive and desire the last couple of years. I mean, not all the youth have it yet, but I feel like there's a movement back toward it, like healthy, clean living and like physical discipline, especially in the masculine realm. Like, because as a man, like subconsciously, if you're fit and like you're disciplined in your life and your body and your appearance, like that's a reflection on your character. It's a reflection then on your business, and it does help you. Like it gets you ahead. And people, even though we're in like a culture that tries to be like non-judgmental to some extent, there's still the realities of subliminal messaging and like the subconscious. And like if you treat yourself like shit and you're sloppy, like it's reflective and people see that. And affects, I do think it affects your business outcomes for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, if somebody is like you said, I mean, not to be judgmental, but if somebody is like put together and they look like they have it together, somebody's going to be more apt to utilize them. Where if somebody's just like disheveled and looks like a train wreck, I mean, how they're carrying themselves is how they're going to probably more than likely do your business.
Makes a lot of sense. So as far as like the young kids, like what specific advice would you give them if they're new to the mortgage lending industry, they want to reach the level of success that you've achieved and they're just starting out? Like, speak to that kid.
Put the time in. Don't expect handouts. I mean, don't go into the business thinking, okay, I'm just going to like be a top producer. You have to like pay the piper. You have to like just grow your business, and just putting in the time, being the first one in the office, being the last one to leave. First thing I would tell people, like if you're in an office and there's calls, pick up the phone. Like be the first one to like take the call, like on the first ring. I mean, that was one of the biggest things too that I was taught by my mentor. Like if people are calling in, they're reaching out for you for business. And if you're not taking those calls and not being aggressive, then you're just going to like get passed up. So it's just paying your dues and growing your business, reaching out to everybody, making the calls, attending events. So having that drive.
What do you think the most misunderstood aspects of like the mortgage lending business are?
I would probably say that everybody thinks it's so easy. It's not. It's not, but it's rewarding. I mean, I get my biggest laughs when like realtors are like, this should be done by now. It's like, there is a lot behind the scenes that you don't know. But even just like somebody trying to like crack into the business, I mean, they think, okay, hey, I go take the SAFE Act exam and then I'm going to be like crushing it. There's a lot of people who are crushing it at Rocket Mortgage and Quicken back in the day, but they were also working 12-hour days, 6 days a week. And when you divide that up by what you're making, the hourly was not really there. So it's like, is the juice worth the squeeze? But if you go to the right place, and I mean, not one bank is perfect for everybody. So, I mean, it depends like what you're looking to do. Maybe you want to be like a CRA lender. Like you can do tons of CRA loans, which are just kind of like community based. And those are for like maybe like a lower net worth person. But you can not.
What's a CRA loan?
Community residential,
okay.
Where maybe you are below like the average like income or and you can get government assistance for those. So there's people who make a living just off of doing like 20 of those loans a month.
That niche.
There's people who want to specialize in all different areas. So it's finding what you're good at. And I don't think there's one loan officer who's like that Swiss Army knife who's good across the board. Like you got to kind of pick your areas.
Similar to residential, you got to pick a niche and then focus on it and own it if you want to be extremely successful at a high level.
Yeah, I had a Mishta deal, and I was lost. So, I mean, people like joke, I mean, but it's just not what I know. And I stay in my lane.
That's so wild. And like the Michigan loan is like the Michigan State subsidized loan. That's like the entry level, first time home buyer, basic like bread and butter. So it's funny that like to that was like outside of your purview.
I had one last year. I'm like, this thing is clear to close. And like somebody was like, you got to still send it to Mishta for approval. I'm like, I knew that. Testing you.
So what aspect of mortgage lending do you actually find most challenging, even though you're accomplished in the business? And then how do you like manage that effectively?
I don't find it complicated. I find it just, those are the deals that I want to have. Like if it's a deal that's like a little like needs to be put back in the fairway, those are what I love. I mean, it's finding a way to get the deal done.
Just because you're actually solving a problem, being creative in the lending process, and you feed off of that.
Yeah, I love to think outside the box, and I think that there's no problems, only solutions, and let's figure out a way to just get this deal done.
What about like the knowledge and changes in the industry? Like, what do you do to keep up to date on what's going on and what's changing in the space?
Over at Citizens, they constantly are giving us like updates. We have great management over there. I mean, my boss Sam, like he and I connect at least like once a week. So if there's something changing, like as far as in the lending space, we're like one of the first groups to know. And I always take it upon myself to make sure like if stuff is being sent out, I'm reading that just so that I'm never caught like, oh, hey, I didn't know that.
Makes sense. So we talked a lot about your successes, man. Have you had any setbacks throughout your career or stuff that like taught you valuable lessons or situations that you had to overcome or navigate that were challenging?
I mean, back in like 2008, I ended up moving down to Florida, worked for a new home builder doing financing just because the market tanked up here. So I mean,
it was brutal in Michigan, yeah.
Yeah, there's always going to be setbacks, but it's how you handle those. I mean, maybe you have to cut back your lifestyle for a year or two. There's always going to be like the changes with the market, and it's just preparing yourself for that.
Are there any of those that taught you extremely valuable lessons or that made you change or grow substantially in the process?
I would say like, I mean, just touching on like where you have like the refi markets where you're growing like your business, and you just have to know what is real growth and what is just part of the market, and always like know that, hey, this could stop any day. Like you could have a bad year. And so always just be prepared for that.
So for the young like brokers starting, like how do you prepare for those changes? Is that just having like a war chest set up or like 6 months of cash reserves, or like what is that in your mindset?
I always like to have like a year's worth of cash reserves. I just think that that's essential. And just know that, like I said, like you could have a great year, but you could have a slow year the next year, or nothing is ever guaranteed. And that's the biggest thing I live by, is just know that you just have to keep working. And if you need to have like a bad year, it's going to happen, but be prepared for it. So I see a lot of people who just spend, and think that this is always going to be like this. And then, boom, they're out of the industry.
And that's never the way it is in the modern market cycles too. With interest rates and quantitative easing, it's like the market is always going to have cycles, and we're going to be sent into crashes, and then we're going to have periods of growth again. And that's how the U.S. economy now is structured, based on a fiat currency, dollar standard controlled by the Fed. I mean, that's just the reality. So yeah, for the young guys to get in the business, I mean, you've got to be prepared for market cycles. It doesn't always just go up. So
yeah, my biggest thing is always, I preach save some money, have reserves. Because I'll do deals for coworkers, colleagues, and it's like you see like reserves. It's like, what are you doing?
You're not stressed and like panicking. Yeah, you know.
How do you sleep?
So, what motivates you, man, internally? Like, because even I know you mentioned your son earlier, but outside of that, like, you've been pretty motivated in the business and the industry and the space even before having a kid in the last 2 years. So, like, what motivates you at a deep level?
Kind of what I said before. Like, I love to challenge myself. Like, every year, I'll look at what I did the previous year, and that's kind of where I have to beat that somehow. Whether it's units, whether it's dollars. I never want to not do better the next year than I did the last year, because I feel like that's moving backwards.
Where does that come from? If you could pinpoint like somewhere in your youth, does that come from your parents, or is that naturally internal? Like, where does that come from?
That's, I think, internal.
You don't think it was shaped by your environment at all, or influences, or like inspirational figures, or?
No, I've always been really self-motivated, and I think that's one of my biggest like assets.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about, like, I know you've been working on a big development. So we talked a lot about lending. So through your sphere of influence and the guys you spend time with, I know you just raised, like, was it like $60 or $70 million for like a development in Miami?
Yeah, we did a $65 million cap raise.
So talk to me about that, because that's like a whole nother level. So you've gone from like doing residential lending for high net worth individuals, and now you're actually raising private capital for a large scale development in Miami. So you guys raised $65 million. That was what, just to buy the dirt, I think?
That was just to purchase the land.
To purchase the land in Miami.
So
talk to me about how that all came about, like, and how you ended up involved in the deal, and like how you're raising, $65 million to buy land, and how big is that development going to be?
65 acres. We bought the land.
$1 million an acre. That's pretty good price, actually, probably for Miami.
And then we have to go through entitlements. Once we get that land titled, we'll have like a sell-off with what we're not going to do, and then use that for capital to take the land vertical.
So hold on. So you guys bought 65 acres for $65 million. You're going to develop it. Now you just said you're going to sell off part of it to recapitalize once. So you guys are essentially subdividing, rezoning the land. You're selling off a portion of it.
Yep.
How much are you going to keep? How much are you selling off?
City council, we have real estate attorneys who are writing the zoning for us and getting that all passed. And then once we finalize what we're going to be putting on there, there's going to be condos, commercial space, like a charter school, office buildings, some other things. I can't speak to all of it, but once we have that all cited and mapped out, whatever excess land they're going to sell off.
Interesting. How much do you think you guys will keep the 65 acres for the development? What's your guess?
Probably 40 to 45 acres.
And then you'll sell off the other 20.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What do you guys think that you'll, on the 20 acres that you're going to then sell off, are you guys intentional about what you're zoning that for to maximize the profitability for it? Or is it being designed to be an ancillary add-on for the primary development you guys are building?
No, they're designing it so max capitalization.
That's awesome. So how big is the total development project? If you're spending $65 million in the land, like what do you guys estimate the total build out to be?
They're saying like $3 to $4 billion.
$3 to $4 billion. Wow. Like that's more than residential. So this is like an entire
It's going to be
community?
like a whole new community right there.
That's wild. How far outside of Miami is this?
About 25, 30 minutes.
Wow. And so with a deal like that, like it seems like it's high risk. Who was it that analyzed and saw the demand and the opportunity in the marketplace to do that? And how'd you end up like who are these guys? How'd you get connected with them? How did you end up in this development side, like raising private funding for?
Not to give out names or anything, but just clients I'd worked with down in that area. Big client came up to me and said, "Hey, what's your experience with this?" Me, I've never done this before. Could I figure out how to do it? Absolutely. Let's do it. And so I've insulated myself with people who are the best at what they do, and we put together a team and got this done.
That's awesome, man. How long did it take you guys to raise $65 million for a land acquisition?
It was about 6 months.
And then who did all the? That's why. That's actually pretty fast, man. Like who did all the prep work as far as pitching the development deal and the viability of it to be able to get credibility and raise the money?
We were pitching it as a team. We had our deck. We had like the attorneys who put everything together. We had all types of like the environmental studies, traffic studies, highest and best use studies, and formulated a deck. And that's what we used to pitch it to some hedge funds.
That's wild.
So there was it's a diverse group of investors.
And you just got tied in with those guys because they were past clients, essentially.
Correct.
That's cool, man. So do you think that you're going to be involved in that project through completion? Like how long is that? If it's $3 to $4 billion development, how long does that take to do? Is it like a 5-year?
They have
deal?
it slotted for about 5 years.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's going to be periods where it's just like the lull where you're waiting for permits, approvals, and then there's times where you have to be on calls nonstop. So, yeah, it's an adventure.
That's exciting, man. How have you enjoyed that process so far, being on the private capital side, raising money for development like that? It's very different from just doing residential loans.
Much different. I've enjoyed it a lot. It's been a challenge, but it's also been probably some of my like largest personal growth.
In what ways has it forced you to grow?
Just in that space, it's humility, because I could be a big time like personal lender, but in that space, I'm learning. So it's sitting back, keeping my mouth shut, and just learning what I can learn.
Interesting. So do you think if this project goes well, you'll probably do more of these type of developments like private capital raises? Is this a viable like longer term business avenue for you, or like where do you see your career going?
This is something definitely I'm going to explore further. I mean, it's not something that I'm going to probably ever do full time, but if I can do one of these every couple of years, absolutely.
That's very cool. Interesting. So do you get compensation then for the capital raise, or do you get like an equity piece, or like how does that usually work in that space?
For this, I'm just working on an equity piece.
That's fantastic. It's probably a better play anyway. I mean, the upside on a development like that's probably huge.
Yep.
That's wild, man. That's very, very cool. It's amazing testimony to like where your career path can take you over time with the right sphere of influence and people around you, in the relationship too. Because if it's like to have clients and they will trust you and say, "Hey, man, go raise $65 million. Like we want to cut you on this deal." That's actually a pretty good testimony to like the relationship that you have with them, considering it's outside of your space and what you do on a day-to-day basis, just with usual like commercial and residential lending.
Yeah, but this is where like that relationship. I mean, with this client, I mean, from day one, we hit it off, and it became, we talk every single day. Like we run business ideas past each other nonstop. And not only do we do business, but I mean, like we have family vacations together. So like it's become a relationship where it's more of a deep friendship than strictly formulated on business.
That's wild. I know we've had some common clients that are worth like $300-400 million. What's the highest net worth like client that you've done a loan for?
Probably right around that $300-400 million.
Yeah, that's a lot, man. Especially if they're immigrants and they came here with $20 in their pocket. It's pretty impressive. What about like, do you have any career insights, man, or counsel regarding like leadership as a topic? Like, any sort of like leadership advice and counsel you have for the next generation in the space?
I mean, I think that we need more leaders out there, because I think a lot of people just want to be following what they see being done. And I think a lot of people just need to like step up in that leadership role, whether it's a title at your job or you're just on a team. Like, I think we need to have more people just step up into that space.
Just take the leap. And
because I think that a lot of people just what I see is, instead of just taking that risk and saying, hey, you know what, this should be the plan, it's like people like stay back because they're afraid of being critiqued or being wrong. And for me, I don't care. I'm going to speak what's on my mind. And if I look like an idiot, hey, I look like an idiot, but at least I took that leap.
Sure. And then you learn from it and you're able to grow. I mean, growth comes through failure and missteps. Like those are the greatest like lessons learned usually through making mistakes. That's just part of the natural process. So the new guys that are like coming into the space that are considering like getting the lending business, can you identify like a couple like key critical skills, or maybe even one critical skill that you think is necessary for success in the space that they should consider?
Ambitious and self-motivated.
Ambitious and self-motivated. You got to have those two things to succeed in this space.
To be your own boss, which we are. I mean, you and I are both 1099 employees. We don't get paid if we're not selling. And if you're not self-motivated, this is not the job for you. I mean, you're better off taking that $75K a year position, working 9 to 5, and having that monotonous lifestyle. Because if you don't get up out of bed thinking, okay, I got to go after it, it's not going to come to you.
Is there like any sort of like belief or practice that you had early in your career that you had to reconsider or change to reach the level of success that you're at?
I think you just have to do like the trial and error. So, I mean, there's always going to be things that I tried that, hey, didn't work, but I knew enough to pull it back in and try something else.
And then take that leap. Yeah. Be willing to fail and try different tactics and strategies. So talking about,
going to work 100% of the time. I mean, with the ever-changing market, you're going to be going after different categories of customers and clients.
So we've talked a decent amount about a lot of these clients have become your friends and you focus on that personal relationship. What advice do you have to like the young kids coming up on how they can turn client interactions into like lifelong friendships and relationships in the way that you have?
Goes back to that word that I've constantly used, loyalty. And it's just having that relationship with them and having that loyalty to them. They're going to have it back, and it's always going to be reciprocated.
So be loyal to them, even if they're not loyal to you in the beginning. If you show that like loyalty, you'll eventually build the reciprocal loyalty over time.
Trust has to be earned.
Makes sense.
Nobody's going to come in and say, hey, I totally trust you as my loan officer 100% right off the bat. They're going to have questions, and it's always like, if you don't know the answer, admit you don't know the answer and come back with the correct answer than just throwing something against the wall and hoping it sticks.
So let's do some just end of round conversational rapid fire questions, and then I think we'll wrap up unless there's some other cool stuff you want to talk about with the developments or like future projects. But what's the single most rewarding experience you've had as a loan officer?
Just getting somebody into their first home. If they didn't think that they could do it, and I mean, I've had customers at the beginning of my career, they might have had like a lower credit score, they couldn't. I coached them. 6 months, they're back, they're getting into their first house. I mean, just getting anybody into their first house and seeing them at the closing table, how excited they are. That's probably the best thing.
So you still have like specific clients, memories and faces that are that pop up when you think of that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and now I'm probably working with them on their second or third home.
That's awesome. What is the one skill that's often underestimated in your industry?
Organization. I still have not perfected that.
So how do you supplement that when you're not naturally the most organized person to still provide a high level of service to your clients?
My assistant and my junior LO.
Okay, so both of those filled out the organizational piece.
They make up for my ineptness.
I feel like that's pretty common though in a lot of like sales roles where you have a lot of drive and ambition and you got to produce the business. Like that personality tends to lack organizational structure and you got to outsource it somehow.
I guess to summarize that better would be balance, because I'm out there on the pavement grinding, just getting people, like selling myself, and I don't take the time to like necessarily go through emails. I mean, Amy can tell you that there'll be emails I don't respond to now, but I've pushed that off to somebody else, and now it's definitely back on course because I was out trying to get the business and it wasn't enough of a balance. So I would have all this business, but then trying to manage that business was a struggle.
Makes sense. So in that, like in how your guys, because in our world, like I've got my own company, our employees are all on salary. I pay for insurance. It's all like under my corporate umbrella. In the lending space though, you have the bank backing you. So do they provide the salary and the pay for like your supporting staff, like your assistant and your LO, or do you have to pay for those yourself? Like, how does that structure work? How's it different from?
So there's a balance
MySpace?
of what the bank will help compensate them, but then also it's basis points off of what we make.
Oh, so they do get like some kicker compensation
Off of what I make, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. But the bank will provide them with like base pay and insurance and all that stuff?
Yes.
That's fantastic. So essentially, like what you said earlier, like you kind of have your choice of the bank you go to. Like when you become a good enough lender, the banks court you because they want your book of business. They then will provide you with the support staff that you need and compensate them as a part of that package to lure you to come work for them.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, if
Makes
you're
sense.
doing, let's say, $5 million a year of lending, and you say, "Hey, I want an assistant," they're
They're
going
going to laugh at you.
They're going to say, "That's not going to happen." But when you have a big enough book of business,
But if you're doing $100+ million every year, then they want that book of
then
business.
they'll provide, because they want those customers to be lifetime customers or clients. And how is that going to happen? Through good service.
Interesting. What's a professional like mantra, phrase, or belief that guides your day-to-day work?
God grant me the serenity.
Really? God grant me that? I was going to say, I didn't see that one coming. That's not exactly where I thought you were going to take that.
Jesus, take the wheel. No, I mean, some days it can be crazy in like the lending world. I mean, you'll get just calls nonstop that, I mean, can send you into panic mode. I mean, whether it's an appraisal that came in low, whether it's somebody who's about to close and you find out they went and bought a new car. I mean, you never know what you're going to cross. So it's just always like, be ready. And it is not a stress-free job. Let's put it that way. And that's what a lot of people think. Oh, you stay so calm and collected. And it's like you have to keep like a solid front, where inside you're like going in 60 different directions.
How do I solve this problem and fix this fire that started today? Yeah, this business is wild, man. So last rapid fire question. When everything else is removed, like the achievements, titles, professional identity, like what remains at your core, like defining who you are?
Just a hardworking person who basically showed that like you can come from like a humble upbringing and you can achieve whatever you want.
The testimony, man. Great life story for sure. And a guy that likes cigars on occasion.
Yeah, I like nice cigars, so that's what I work for.
Nice cigars and nice things. You do have expensive taste. Does that drive part of your motivation, your fuel, or?
I think it's dwindling. When you kind of look at the grand scheme of things and having kids, it's like the nice things don't necessarily
They're less
count as
important.
much.
That's fair. Well, dude, it's been fun today, man. I appreciate your insight on the industry. It's funny because, like, even though I'm in the space, like the lending world is so different from residential. Like the entire back end and how each of the banks works is different, and like the underwriting processes and like all the complexities of that world. And I've seen a little bit into it, but it's like it is very, very different from like the residential sales front. So it's fun to sit down and chat, and have a conversation, man, about how you built your business and what that looks like, and inspire this next generation of kids to find fulfilling career paths that they can accomplish their hopes and dreams with.
I mean, with your like loan, as we kind of go back to that, I mean, you've gotten to see like a real deep dive into like working with the big box bank and being on some of those calls where it's not necessarily as easy as people would think it would be.
No, not
you
at
got
all.
so many different channels that you have to run it up. I mean, there's so
Well, to
many.
clarify too, I'm doing a construction loan, which is far more complicated. I mean, when you're building a multi-million-dollar house, and with construction loans, it's complicated because there's draws, there's authorizations involved, there's a bunch of middle parties. It's not like a normal conventional where you're just buying an end finished home. Yeah.
That's behind the scenes for any bank. There's always going to be a lot of red tape that you have to go through. Whether it's construction loan, whether it's a first-time home buyer, or just a regular mortgage. So,
Yeah, you guys, your job is to make that as streamlined as possible for the client experience easy, and then you handle all the back end difficulties, overcome the objections, get the bank on the side of the client, and push things
because
forward.
our last thing that we want to do is bring an objection to you. We want to nip those in the bud before it gets to the point where we even have to bring it to you. So there's a lot of like dog and like pony show that you gotta keep, where it's all flowers and sunshine in the front, and in the back you're scrambling.
Well, it's been fun, man. You'll definitely be one of the first guys over to the house when it's done, and we'll have a drink and a cigar. And I'm looking forward to hopefully doing that in Miami sometime with you, man. I would love to see that development project and celebrate with you down there and see that come to fruition. So
For sure.
it's a big deal. Producer, do we have any extra ancillary questions, or did we cover it today?
Covered it.
Brandon,
Awesome.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate the time and the counsel and the insight. Guys, thanks for stopping into the Bulldogs Podcast. Hopefully you found some takeaways to inspire your career journey. And remember, this is America. You can build any sort of life you want. The possibilities for success are endless, regardless of where you come from and regardless of which industry you choose to succeed in. So cheers to you guys, to living lives of epic proportions and having a hell of a lot of fun in the process. See you on the next one.